Yeah, hey, so you know how I made that other video about how maternal behavior basically gets activated during birth, and that's why if you've never had kids before, you might not feel any type of way, not drawn to kids at all, but after birth, it's a totally different story, and like you're really attentive, or generally, mothers tend to be very attentive, and basically, they know what to do and they engage in the maternal behavior because of the hormones that are coursing through their blood. So, that's what I learned in my hormones class. And then you might have a question like, okay, if that's the case, then how do you explain mothers who aren't motivated to take care of their kids and who maybe don't engage in that behavior, and the whole idea of like getting depressed after birth, not feeling bonded to your child? How does that make any sense if birth is supposed to activate those behaviors with through hormones? And to that, I say, quite unfortunately, actually, that you can blame their mothers. And I don't mean that in a psychological type of way, because they have psychological trauma in the way that we think or believe that that works. But according to the hormones class that I took, it's related to physiology. It's our bodies. It's the way that our brains end up being organized in a way that when those hormones of pregnancy and specifically birth, so during birth, you'll have estrogen that's still high, and also oxytocin has to be high because during birth you need the uterine contractions to take place, and oxytocin allows that to happen. And of course, then you have prolactin also that goes up because you need to produce milk. And oxytocin keeps staying high later on because oxytocin allows for the milk to be ejected basically from the milk duct. So that all goes back to, okay, well, given that those hormones are coursing through the woman's blood, why aren't they activating those maternal behaviors like we would expect? And why I said that it has to do with their mothers, if we can blame their mothers, is, I'm laughing because it's like that. It just seems ridiculous. Like, what does their mom have anything to do with how well of a mother, or like how engaged of a mother they're going to be in the future? How are those two things related? It seems that they wouldn't be related, or if they would be related, you would think, okay, it's psychological because as they grow up, like that mother may not take care of the child in a great way, and then they have their like childhood trauma. But it's even more basic than that. And this is all, like, as I said in my previous video, in the research with rats, because obviously we're not going to do this kind of research with humans, but we can imagine that it's definitely not 100% the same, but there may be similarities. And so in rats, when the mother has a pup, the way that she takes care of that female pup, let's say we're going to talk about female pups, there's she also takes care of the male pups, but she's going to take care of them a little bit differently. So she needs to like lick him more, and that's going to affect his sexual behavior when he's an adult. I know it's weird, but we didn't learn about that. So we learned a little bit about that, but not a whole lot, maybe because the mechanism is not well understood. But yeah, with the female pups, it is well understood. So the way that the mother is going to take care of the female pup, depending on if she basically does a lot of caretaking, and by like a lot or good caretaking, that would mean a lot of licking and grooming, because the mothers, when they're taking care of their pups, they have to be close to them. Of course, they feed them, but they're also licking and grooming them. And there can be two groups where you have some high licking and grooming mothers and low licking and grooming mothers. And if you have a high licking and grooming mother, that is going to not change your genetics because the DNA underneath it's the same, right? It's like you were born with a certain set of, genes, and your DNA is set. That doesn't change, but you can have a changing of the expression of your genes, what genes get turned on and off, and that's related to epigenetics. And depending on which genes are turned on or off, you can have a completely different kind of phenotype of like the presentation of what that looks like. So two people could have, you could imagine like two twins, right? They have monozygotic twins, right? So two monozygotic twins who have 100% the same DNA, but maybe one of them had different life experiences, and that would result in certain genes being turned on and off, and they might have an illness that the other twin, even though that they're 100% genetically identical, doesn't have. So this is the role of epigenetics, right? Like they don't change the underlying genes, they stay the same, the DNA stays the same, but they change what's expressed, so which genes get turned on and turned off. So a high licking and grooming mother would turn on genes that would allow for more receptors in that female baby's pup's brain, more receptors for estrogen. And then if you have more receptors for estrogen, when that female is going to be flooded with the estrogen hormones later on in her life, those estrogen, the estrogen binding to its receptors is going to have a downstream cascade effect of having more oxytocin receptors and prolactin receptors. And guess what? Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. So a high licking and grooming mother is basically transmitting, turning on those genes in her pup to be a high licking and grooming mother herself later on. It's like a positive cycle, because she's going to be the female baby later when she's an adult and is taking care of her own pups. Her brain is going to be more sensitive to the estrogen and then more sensitive to the oxytocin, so she's going to feel more bonded. And we don't know what rats feel, of course, but she's going to end up expressing those behaviors of high licking and grooming, and that continues down generations. So that's really interesting. And the other part is, so this is what happens in the brain specifically. It's in the MPOA, the medial preoptic area. And this area of the brain also communicates with, guess what? The reward center of the brain. So the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, the reward pathway of the brain. And so if that is more activated, then she's going to feel more motivated to take care of her kids. However, the opposite is also true, right? If you have a low licking and grooming mother, is gonna down-regulate the receptors for estrogen, and then less oxytocin, so less feeling bonded, and then also less activity in the reward center of the brain, less motivation to take care of her pups. Very interesting. And how do we know that it's epigenetic and not genetic? Well, of course, we might be looking at the DNA. That's one thing. But we also know this from really interesting cross-fostering studies, where you basically give the infants of a high licking and grooming mother, for example, to a low licking and grooming mother. So they have the DNA of the high licking and grooming mother because they were born from her. It's her babies, but they're given to the low licking and grooming mother, and you see that in adulthood they will express low licking and grooming behavior because it's epigenetic, not genetic. So yeah, basically that might have been a question that you had based on the last video that I made, which was, okay, well, given that everything is related to hormones and we should have these activation of maternal behaviors through the hormones that are coursing through our blood and our bodies at birth, how come certain mothers don't feel much? They don't feel motivated, they don't feel bonded. And that's kind of the answer that I came to. Of course, like, I don't want to say that it's so simplistic because I don't know. Again, we haven't done those studies in humans and we never will do those studies in humans because that would be unethical. So we really don't know. And there are probably definitely psychological factors because we are, a lot in our heads more than other animals. Other animals don't think the way that we do. They don't think as much as we do. Like, we're very, very much in our heads and less so in the present moment. But I believe that there are similarities and it makes sense to me. You might have a different opinion and I'd love to hear it. Yeah, I'd like to hear your opinion and I'd like to know if you kind of see it the way that I do too. If you think that, okay, well, we saw that in rats and there is definitely a possibility that it is similar for us too, because epigenetic changes are something that humans go through as well. And our childhood, especially infancy, is such a critical period of our life. It's a literal critical period. It's like when things are happening, why wouldn't that affect us on an epigenetic level, right? That's pretty much it for today. All right, love you, bye.